Now we're on Daf Chavav Amid Beis. Aval haminim vehamesoros vehamumarim hayimoridim v'lomal. Now we have a much more extreme situation in which the halacha becomes very severe, and basically we look for a way in these three categories of implementing capital punishment. Just we can't do it actively because we don't have the proper courts and so forth and so on, but we could do it through grama and throw him into a pit, like the brothers did to Yosef. Who are these three categories? Number one, minim. Number two, misoros. And number three, mumor. We're going to have a lot to discuss about mumor. So we have minim. Now, historically, who the minim are is a subject of controversy. Some say it's the early Christians, the Hebrew Christians. But be that as it may, everybody agrees that minim are very dangerous. And they threaten the life of the Jews. Now, misoros, what's called a moser, could also apparently threaten the life of a Jew, even though informers are there only to extort money from the Jews, but nevertheless, sometimes they'll endanger the lives of the victims. Let's say if they extort too much money, a person might die of hunger. So these people have to be put to death, but we don't put them to death actively. We throw them into a bar. V'lo malin, and we don't save them and take them up from the bar. I mean, the Gemara is going to ask, why do you have to tell me lo malin? If you're allowed to throw them into the bar, certainly you're not going to take them out of the bar and save them. Anyway. But the third category here is called mumarim. Mumarim are those, a mumar l'kol tarkul is someone who violates the entire Torah. Does he do so l'teyovim for self-gratification? He loves nevela. Or does he do it lahachis? He could just as easily satisfy his gratification, could achieve through kosher meat, but he dafka wants to eat treifa meat. That's called a mumar lahachis. Amalei. So when Rabbi Yochanan heard about this brayso from Rabbi Yavo, he turns to Rabbi Yavo and he says, Ani shoneh, I have a drasha which contradicts your brayso. That lechol avedas achicha, in the parsha of Hashavas Aveda, the Torah adds the extra lechol, and that ribu is l'rabos samumar. So even if you have a rebellious Jew, you're still obligated to return his aveda. Now you're telling me about a mumar, according to your brayso, in the text that you have, we're allowed to kill him. Now read it. So Riavo says, Sami mikan mumar. You're right. I have to cross out the word mumar. Your drasha is correct. And we have to return an aveda to a mumar, and therefore, obviously, it's not morid. Take it out. That's called Sami mikan. Erase it from the brayso. So now the Gemara asks the following question. Why was Rabbi Avo so hard pressed, like checkmate, cornered from the objection, the kasha of Rabbi Yochanan? You know what? I can accept the drasha of Rabbi Yochanan, and I can still at the same time accept the girs of the text of the brayso that with regard to a mumar, moridin, because there are two categories of a mumar. There's a category of a mumar l'te'avon. He's not a dangerous individual. He's not trying to undermine the entire Torah. He just wants gratification. That's called a mumar l'te'avon. Such a person is still considered within the Jewish fold. He has taivas, he has desires, he needs gratification, he can't overcome those desires, but he's still a Jew. But then you have a mumar lahachis. He wants to show you that he wants to violate the Torah. He's rebellious by his very nature. That's a dangerous individual. And then Morid. So why didn't Rabbi Avo give that answer? Lishnei Le, let Rabbi Avo answer. Kan, here in the case of the Bryce of Rabbi Yochanan that we darshan, that we return an Avoda to a Mumar, is for Mur Ochel Nevos L'Teyavon. He only eats Nevela L'Teyavon for gratification. Or maybe he saves himself a good buck. He doesn't want to buy meat that has a hechsher on it. So he buys Nevela, tray for meat. But not because he's a Mumar L'Hachis. He just wants to save himself a buck so he could use that money to buy drugs or pay for I don't know what. But Khan, when does the Bryce of Rabbi Avo apply that Morid him, we get rid of this Mumar? You give him 2 pieces of meat at the same price. One is kosher, one is treif, and he dafka wants to eat the treif of meat. He's rebellious against the Torah, rejects the Torah. Such a person is very dangerous. So the Gemara answers, you know why Rabbi Avo didn't give this very simple, straightforward answer? Because Hachis minhu. Meaning, Rabbi Avo is in trouble because there were 2 categories that seemed to be identical listed in his brisa. There was a category called a min, which we said is someone who, let's say, accepts Christianity against Judaism. And then you have the case listed in the same brisa of a mumar. Now you're telling me the mumar is a mumar lahachis. Well, a mumar lahachis is like someone who worships idols. It's like an idolater. He rejects the whole Torah. So why would the brisa have listed them separately as 2 separate classifications? Itmar, we learned to the brisa. Now we get down to grass packs. What is the status of a mumar? Is pligi Rav Acha v'Ravina? There's a debate, a controversy between Rav Acha and Ravina. We don't know who holds what. Chad Omer, according to one opinion, l'teyav a mumar lahachis min havi. If he's a mumar l'teyav and only for the sake of gratification, then okay, he's a mumar l'teyav. You don't have to give him shishi or shlishi. But he's not a min. But if he's a mumar lahachis, he has the same status as a min. And we're going to be much more machmir on a min, which means we'll be so stringent that it could be that we'll throw him into a pit. And if he writes a Sefer Torah and tries to get away with it and sell it, we're going to burn the Sefer Torah because he's a min. Chad Omar, according to the other opinion, Afil lahachis, he's not a min. Min is an outright idol worshiper. This guy rejects the Torah, and he does so in a rebellious way, but he's not a min, even though he's lahachis. He's only a mumar. And if he writes the Sefer Torah, we won't burn it. Ela is a min. What is a min? He worships idols. Meisvei, you just finished telling me that if he's l'teyavon, he's a mumar, but if he's lahachis, he's considered a min. What do we do with a brisa that says ochel parash echad o yatush echad areizeh mumar? We're talking about a person who's lahachis. He gets no gratification from eating fleas or gnats. He only does so because he wants to indicate his rebellion. And yet, harezeh mumar. You just finished telling me, according to the first man the Yomi quoted here, that lahachis, he's a min. Here's a case of a mumar lahachis, and it says he's a mumar. He's not a min. As we said before over and over again, the halach is much more stringent in the case of a min. Here, he's only classified as a mumar, even though he's lahachis. Gemara says no. He's l'teyah. The guy likes fleas. Hasam boy lemitam time of the surah. So this is a Gemara that we had once at the end of Masechet Nedarim, that there's like a certain flavor and a certain special gratification that you get from eating something that's awesome. What's the pasuk called? It'll come to me. Anyway, it's a pasuk in Mishlei. Oh yeah, Mayim Gnuvim Yimtaku. You can give me 2 cups of water, but if I stole one of them, I enjoy that water more because it's Mayim Gnuvim. And you have a case of a man who dafka hopes that this woman that he's having relations with is a married woman because he gets more pleasure from Esau. So this guy wants to eat fleas and gnats because it has a special good taste. I think I told you once that we were in the Philippines. No, not in the Philippines. We're in Thailand. We never made it to the Philippines, but in Thailand. And right there in the street, they eat all the bugs you could ever think of. They sell them. They fry them. I found it disgusting. I didn't even want to look at it. I was with someone else who wanted to look at it. So I don't know, maybe fried lice tastes good. I don't know. A friend of mine who's a Baal Tshuva told me that you can't imagine the taste of lobster. I said, lobster, that stuff that I see in the Italian, it's who would want to eat that? He says, I don't know, it has a very special taste. Omar Mar, Hayimoridim Avalo Malin. Right, we saw in the Brisa that they would, when it's a full-fledged, min, they would throw him into the pit and they wouldn't take him up. You have to tell me that we don't take him up. We threw him into the pit in order to kill him. What's the case that we needed to tell you? That let's say, for example, this min or moser fell into a bar, and then there were ways that he could climb out of the bar. Like there were ledges that he could attach himself on to climb up out of the bar. You know what? The halacha is low milin, meaning you have to actively do whatever you can in order to guarantee that he doesn't get out of the bar. Dinokit le'ilah. The Omar lo techus cheva ilah. Give the goyim an excuse as to why you scraped away and removed these ledges. You tell them a story. My animals shouldn't climb down to the bottom of the bar and use these ledges. I won't be able to get my animal out. Rav Yossi the Amishavaylo Nitzcha. Why did we need the part of the brisa that says Avalo Mailin Shim Hoisa Evan Al Pia Be'er Mechasa? Let's say this min or moser went down to the bottom of the bar. There was a stone at the opening of the pit. The chiddush here of Lo Mailin is that you cover the opening of the pit by putting the stone, which is at the opening of the pit, over the pit. Well, how are you going to explain it to the goyim? And they're going to accuse you of murder? I had no idea there was somebody down in the pit. I needed to get my animals to cross over from one side to the other. I didn't want them to fall into the pit, so I covered the pit. Ravina Omar, Shimhoyasua Misalko. If the min or the moser fell into the bar and there's a ladder for which he could climb out of the bar, then remove the ladder. And Omar, and you have to explain it away to the goyim, I was in a very dangerous, precarious, urgent situation. My son was about to fall off a ledge. The only way I could save him is by climbing up on the ladder. I took the ladder. I didn't have any intention to kill the min or the moser. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Brisa, Yisrael mol es ha'ovek hacham l'shum get. Right, if an idol worshiper wants to become a ger, and he has to undergo milah, then the Yisrael does the milah. Okay, I mean, like, who else is going to do the milah? What's the chiddush here? So Gemara explains, La fuke l'shum marna. Dula. Gemara says the following. Let's say that the Jew is some sort of urologist or urological surgeon, and an idol worshiper has some sort of, we'll call it a parasite, under his orla, under his foreskin. Is the Jewish urologist permitted to perform surgery to, so to speak, to circumcise this RL for the sake of removing a parasite? And the answer is no. He's not allowed to do that. And this comes under the general rule that we're not mala, an idol worshiper, from a pit. We don't do anything to save an idol worshiper. Let him die of this parasite. Then the Brisa says, "V'yovid lo Yisrael." Now this I don't understand. What's the chiddush here? So apparently, the milah of an akum is kosher. Again, we're not going to allow it, but it's kosher. So I was always wondering, the Medrash says that when Avram Avinu got the tzivu of milah, he himself was the moel, and he cut off his own skin. Now, you might ask, but Avram Avinu is an akum, he's still a guy. Until after the milah, how can he perform the milah? I mean, there are many answers to that question, but one answer is that an akum can perform milah. Again, we're not going to allow it. We could even we don't have to worry about it. For Rabbi Meir, nami lo de zimnin de matzli le sakina umashvi le krus shavcha. You know what this Ovei Kacham could do? Obviously, he can't kill the Jew because it's public and people are seeing him, standing over him. But what he could do is, if he tilts the knife slightly, a few degrees, then he could make the Yisrael mutilated in his genitals. And that would make him into a kroshuvcha, which means he can never get married, and that would guarantee that this Jew would never have more Jews and bring more Jews into the world. And therefore, Rabbi Meir says, no matter how many people are around, we cannot allow an Ovei Kochavim to perform milah. Frek Gemara, v'sava Rabbi Meir Ovei Kochavim lo. Is it really so that Rabbi Meir maintains and is committed to the position that under no circumstances can we allow an idol worship to circumcise a Jewish child? Ramini, but what about this brisa? That contradicts. Ir she'em barofe Yisrael. Let's say there's no moel that's Jewish in the town. V'yesh barofe mua ukusi, barofe ovei kochavim. Right, but you have a kusi or an akum who is a doctor who could perform the surgery. For some strange reason, Reb Meir prefers that the idol worshiper perform the milah and not the kusi. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yomel Kusi Al Yomel Ovei Kochavim. Rabbi Yehuda says that which is more intuitive. A kusi maybe has the status of a Jew. That's a controversy. But don't let the akum circumcise it. But in any event, we have here a stira between two statements of Reb Meir. Reb Meir in one brisa has an absolute unconditional prohibition against allowing an akum to perform milah on a Jewish child because he'll mutilate the child. And yet in this brisa, if we don't have a Jewish moel available, then Reb Meir advocates in favor of an akum to be the moel. So Gemara answers Eipuch. We're gonna have to switch it around between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir in this last brisa. Rabbi Meir Omer Yomul Kusi V'lo Ovid Kochavim. Rabbi Meir accepts the validity of the gerus, the status of a kusi, but not an Ovid Kochav because he'll mutilate the child. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ovid Kochavim, have the Ovid Kochavim perform the milah. So we're not really understanding why below kusi rather than the kusi. Now it could be in the case of a kusi, we have a machshava, like this is a Gemara, I believe it's in Chulin, if I remember correctly, where the kusim put up a yona, a dmus of a dove on top of the mountain, and they would worship that. So he might do the milah as part of his idolatry, and it's an act of avodas kol chavit. Frek the Gemara, v'savar Rabbi Yehuda ovid kol chav shaper dami. You're assuming now that Rabbi Yehuda validates the milah of an akum, of an idol worshiper. V'latani, we learned in the Brisa Rabbi Yehuda Omer minayin lemilah b'ovid kol chav shipsula. If an ovid kol chav performs milah, the milah is invalid. And he derives it from a pasuk, shenemar, and this is a pasuk in the Parsha Milah at the end of Lech Lecha. It says, V'ata es brisi tishmar, and V'ata, meaning the Jewish people will be in charge of the bris, but not an idol worshiper. Eloliolam lo tefuch. We're going to have to go back to the original statement as formulated in the Brisa before we switched it around. And that would mean that according to Rabbi Yehuda, Yomul Kusi, when accept the gerus and validate the status of a Kusi as a Jew, the Al Yomul Ovid Kocham Rabbi Yehuda would not accept the milah of an Ovid Kocham. It's possible because of the pasuk, the Atas Brisi Tishmar. But now, when we get to Rabbi Meir, we're in deep trouble, because Rabbi Meir holds Yomul Ovid Kocham. Okay, lo Yomul Kusi, that I understand because he has in mind he's part of his idol worship. But why do you advocate the milah of an Ovid Kocham? And even Rabbi Meir, if you reject the drush of Atat es Brisi Tishmar, but you are afraid that the guy will mutilate the child. More answers Hachamay Askinan. Why did Rabbi Meir allow the guy to perform the milah? And here we'll look a little bit on Daf Chav Zayin, Berofe Mumche. So what? Adarabah. If the urologist surgeon is more of an expert, maybe that's more reason to fear that he'll mess up the child, if you know what I mean, mutilate the child. But the Chiyasar of Dimi Omer Rabbi Yochanan im Hayamum Chalarabim Mutter. Okay, so let's understand that this is all about reputation. And the concept that we mentioned many times of Uman Lomara Umanusayu, that a professional doesn't want to endanger his reputation. So this expert doctor who has reputation to do the best kind of a surgery possible to protect the victim, he would not risk mutilating a child because he'll lose his reputation. So the word mumcha here means tested in the sense of having stood the test of experience, referring to a seasoned doctor who successfully practiced medicine for some time. He's called a mumcha l'rabi. Okay, then, now, just as an introduction, we have to stop, but introduction to the next part of the sugya, which is a continuation of what we started today, V'sar Rabbi Yehuda Kusi Shaper Dami, and we're going to try to prove that the Kusi, according to Rabbi Yehuda, has in mind when he circumcises a child, l'shem hagrizim. That's where they put up this idol on top of hagrizim. So therefore, how can we say that if lo tepuch, if you don't switch around the names of the brisa, Rabbi Yehuda advocates that the kusi do the mila. He cannot accept that in ovikochav because ata is brisi tishmor. Akum cannot achieve a valid mila according to Rabbi Yehuda, but instead he validates the mila of a kusi. Well, a kusi, according to Rabbi Yehuda, has in mind for an idol worship. And that's what we'll pick up in Mirza Hashem. Same time, same place tomorrow. Have a great day.